Hello everyone, welcome to THLGK. Retroprojection. This is a very interesting tool that was used in the construction of the biblical text. I mean, once again, I could call a manipulation tool, but this is exclusively regarding the construction of a lot of the biblical texts themselves. So nowadays, it's not necessarily used, but the fact you are not told could be seen as an attempt to manipulate. Let's check it out. Now, let's start by understanding the idea behind the term, because I was taught as retroprojection, but in English is a little bit more complicated, because I don't think there's a one-for-one word here. The idea is basically closer to presentism, or historical fallacy, or historical transposition. What? Or all that together. It's when someone from the present writes as if they were someone from the past, someone living in the past, someone encountering the challenge of the past. However, this challenge they are writing about is from the present. So basically, the author retroprojects, this is the idea, the present and the past, create an entire narrative so it can affect the present. This is what it means. This is what it was used, especially in the Old Testament, especially in the Torah, the book of Joshua, maybe even the historical books. So, focusing specifically on the Torah, you basically have people around 500 BC writing as if they were Moses, who would have lived around 1,000 years before, making Moses, again making because it's a character, making Moses say the things they want to say, making Moses engage with situations they want him to engage, because those situations are the situations from 500 BC, from the present of the author. But they are throwing all that 1,000 years, because here's the thing with that culture. For them, the oldest the better. That's the problem. You know, We are going to have this problem in the New Testament between Jesus, the disciples of Jesus, and the disciples of John the Baptist. John the Baptist was older than Jesus, so he was more important. Of course, the disciples of Jesus won't accept this. This is the same idea, the same cultural idea, the same cultural value. The older something is, the better it is, the more authority it has. In some cases, we even think about this today, right? How many times they said, oh look, what I'm talking about has been around for hundreds of years. Basically as if hundreds of years were going to make what I'm talking about here any truer. Of course, I always use to show that the research has been around, but you have the responsibility, if you want, to go and check it out for yourselves. But what they did was, someone is facing a problem or wants a change in the population, wants the population to do something, wants them to behave in a way. So they go and they either sit, or more likely they tell a scribe, and the scribe goes and starts writing it. And then they tell the story, and this is important. Remember, the Bible, especially the Hebrew Bible, was not to be read. In the sense that it was not a book like we have today that we sit down and we read. It was to be enacted, to be spoken and listened. One person is the person speaking, the people is listening. So they wrote the story as if they were Moses. Why? Because Moses is this figure, this mythological figure, this tradition that exists in the land that everyone probably respected. It's a source of authority. See, the manipulation tools I've been talking about, yes, they were used even back then, even when they were writing the Bible. So they picked a tradition, the name of a person that had authority, and they used that to construct their narrative. But they don't tell you, they don't tell their audiences, this is a book. It's not a book, it's like a text, right? Again, okay, I step back. We see the Bible as a book. The Bible is actually a collection of books, but it's also a book in the Bible tends to be a collection of texts. Especially things like the Torah. There are things written differently in different times for different reasons that at some point someone put them all together under the ideology of the Temple of Jerusalem. So you have a bigger hand, an ideological hand that still lets things escape, but it doesn't matter right now. That's why there are contradictions. It's not because one person is writing it and then that person, oh, I forgot what I wrote back then, and they write something completely opposite. No, it's because you have one person that for one reason wrote one piece of text. It's called pericopes. The books of the Bible, they are divided in pericopes. Usually, as if you open a Bible, are the subtitles that you have, they tend to mark the pericopes. That's why if you open Genesis 1, you have a subtitle in chapter 2 verse 4 instead of right in the new chapter. No, you go from Genesis 1 to 2:4. That's one paragraph, that's one text, one unit of meaning, probably written in a place for a reason. Then someone wrote for another reason Genesis 2:4. Of course, it was not called Genesis 2:4, it was a text. Then at some point, when they were constructed, let's put them all together. That's called the book of Genesis. And someone came, they picked this text, Genesis, put Genesis 1. And then the second, they glued the text together. That's why they don't know where in verse 4, Genesis 2:4, where is the division, where Genesis 1, the narrative of Genesis 1 ends, and where the narrative of Genesis 2 begins. They merge them together, and then they continue. That's why I say, the people in the Bible, they are characters. They follow what the authors wanted. And one of the ways the authors wrote, especially the Torah, the story of Abraham, of Isaac, of Moses, of Joshua, was this way. Retroprojection or presentism, whatever you want to call it. They basically projected to the past the problems, the circumstances, the issues of the present. So retroprojected. They put that in the mouths and actions of the people who allegedly lived there, actually. Why? Because those people were seen in high regard by the population. And then these texts were told to the people as stories. Now, some believe the people understood it was all made up. Some would say they are trying to play them. Again, it's irrelevant. What relevant now is today. Today, when you open a Bible, if you're going to read it, we are not told that these texts, at least as a rule, right? There are exceptions, but usually we are not told that these texts were not written by these people, that they were written around 500 using older people, older traditions for their benefit, for their narratives. This is why, in my opinion, it's a problem. Again, it's a lack of honesty. Just say, oh yes, yeah, the authors used Moses, we don't even know if he exists, to construct the Torah. But it doesn't sound good, right? It doesn't sound godly. It doesn't sound supernatural. Because it isn't. That's why I say a scientific approach destroys the gods, deconstructs religions. Because you can find these human elements. And if you ask, how can they know this? How can they know it was not Moses? Textual analysis. We don't have the books from 500 BC. We don't have a single manuscript. Because again, the texts were read, and they are rows of text. So with time, they decay. I mean, our books, imagine if you have a book and you keep reading it from time to time. The pages will decay. It's the same with the rows in the past. So what happened was, as it was decaying, they would copy it on another row. So it was already decayed because of use. Now, what happened? Maybe it was discarded, maybe eventually be destroyed. We can say for sure, but this is the idea. It's use. Again, when we were talking about anachronism, which this could also be considered to be. But when you are talking about anachronism, we think of education very different than what education was. There was no education in the past. A small group of people knew how to write and read. So they were responsible for this. If the priest wanted something recorded, they would go to the scribe, and the scribe would go and write it down. And then it would be passed until the moment they all decided, let's make a book out of this, let's put them all together, and then they start constructing one thing. But even so, even that, it was decaying, and then they had to copy. It's not like today that we can preserve a book easily. Things were expensive. Say, oh, why didn't they preserve the manuscript? Because it was expensive. So they couldn't make a lot of them. So, oh, we have a surplus. We have enough to keep them stocked, preserved for the future. No, they didn't have this. It was very expensive. So you use until you can't, you write it down, and then you one, and then it goes on. Of course, there's one copy, there's probably a few, but still, there was not enough that they survived to this day. So how did they know them? It's Moses. It's not Moses. Precisely because of the problems. One of the reasons, I've gave a few in previous episodes. But the problems written as if they were happening to Moses, they were the problems of 500 BC, of around 500 BC. They are not the problems of 1500 BC, 1200 BC. The issues were not the issues of the times of Moses. And then you have the way it's spoken and all that. But this is another of the ways that are used to date the text and to find out when it's an author projecting in the past the issues of the present. That's why I said their salvation is that we don't know how to read ancient Hebrew, ancient Greek. Because if you could, noticing these things would have been much, much easier. I hope I'm being able to demonstrate how these elements and the manipulation tools, which again, in the back of my mind I keep thinking, man, everything is manipulation tool because religion is dishonest and deceitful and all that. But another parts go, well, but come on, so repetitive to say manipulation tool, manipulation tool. And then we end up, but you can see that they all fit and work together to produce the religious narratives. It's very rarely you're going to find a single one of them. And here, when we talk about this artifice of the biblical authors to project in the past, in the characters they created, the problems of the present, because the culture was a culture who valued older things, the oldest the better, then I think you can see how this game has been played for thousands of years. 500 BC we are talking the Torah. So from today, around 2,500 years. And this is considering Judaism and Christianity alone. That's it, the other religions. But again, this is the difficulty in studying religions. Because I don't see myself as an academic, and this is not an academic channel. I see myself as a doorman. What I'm doing is, if you come here, I will show you, and I say, look, this is what is inside, or at least this is what I think is inside, and I will open the door. If you want to go in or not, that's your choice. Because it's very, very complicated. I imagine studying the Hindu texts, the Shinto texts, the Islamic texts. You see, to have this degree of scientific, methodological rigor, I mean, how would that work in Islam? Which is not a very, it's not that Islam is a very, it's that the countries are more religious, and religion is strong. The West, the countries are more secular, so we don't have to live in fear of religion. If the West wasn't, I'd probably be dead by now. This is no exaggeration. Just looking at history, you see that even members of the church that spoke against it found their end. If they had powerful friends, they at least got arrested, like Galileo was. But hey, he was forgiven around 500 years later. There is a cartoonist here in Brazil, and I don't think I'll be able to find it, and if I did it, I don't even know if I could show. But it's very interesting. It's basically 3 frames. The first one, you have Galileo and Darwin basically burning hell within cages. It's been years since I've seen this. And then you have the second is the devil coming in, and he's taking Galileo. Say, come on, Galileo, you have been forgiven. You're going to heaven now. And the last one is Darwin alone, basically screaming, oh, how about me? This is the idea I'm trying to show you guys. They did the things in the past. They condemned the people, in this case a person. And then 500 years, oh, we're sorry. Well, you are long dead. Right? What happened to you, happened to you. And 500 years later, they apologize. Why? Do you think, oh, they wanted to apologize? No. Because every time people mention those things, it's like a sting. Now they can say, no, he was forgiven. Yeah, the church was wrong. As if that were to erase everything that happened. It's a different form of retroprojection, right? So yeah, he is forgiven here, and the idea is basically you think that in the past he was forgiven. I mean, I think I'm being a bit hyperbolic now, but this is it. So when you're reading a text in the Bible, and you are paying attention to the narrative, a very well-crafted narrative. And Moses said, it's like a movie, right? And Moses walked up the mountain, like someone is witnessing what's happening. It's because it's being created hundreds of years, maybe even 1,000 years after that person would have allegedly exist, because it gives the message more authority. And that's how they want to manipulate the people. Now, if the people knew, or if the people pretended they accepted, because otherwise there would be use of force, that's a discussion for another time. That's it for today. This is one of the things you learn pretty. I can make this claim because, again, here's the thing: every place that you go to study religion is different. It depends on your denomination. It would depend in their doctrines and all that. So it varies quite a lot. Any serious institution teaches this rather fast. Because usually the leadership, at least the high leadership, knows all this. Now, if they teach the common pastor, the common priest, that's a different story. Because there is that saying, right? If you don't know it's a lie, you continue believing it's true. I don't think it's the same, just spouting things out. But that's the idea. A lot of these institutions, the highest degrees of leadership, say, oh, it's better if they don't know. And they give them partial truths, so they will only repeat the partial truths. Without being aware of the world of information that's out there. One that today is never been easier to access. In the tip of our fingers, a lot of this information you can find on the internet. So if you are interested, as I always say, check it out for yourselves. Because religion, man, the discussion of religion is one where you should never trust what anyone says, including myself. Don't trust it. Because it's very, very ideologically possessed. But I mean, if you don't have the time, it's a real complication, huh? You can keep watching the videos, sharing, liking, subscribing. Now this is a good transition, right? I mean, I got it right there. I screwed it up by by making this observation, but still, sharing, checking out X and the articles. The articles usually take longer to write than to record this video. I was realizing that yesterday. I was writing the article for the next video, for the last video, and I suddenly realized, so this takes me longer to do than making the videos, but it's still a lot of the information they are similar. But if something I had to talk about in the video and for some reason I didn't, you'll find it there. So check it out if you have the time. Thank you for watching, and I see you all next time.